and all completely bilingual, right? All in Spanish or English based on who the audience was. And the interesting thing about this group was that it was very purposefully for non-actors and for marginalized youth from Vancouver. So most, I would say pretty much all of them, no, that's not true. Most of the members of the Latino theater group were also exiles. That was the demographic in the 90s in Vancouver. The Latinx demographic were exiled people from Central America and from South America. And of course, many, many, many undocumented people who crossed the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo. It was so great to hear Sabina talk about that in the keynote, on foot, and walked to Vancouver and were still undocumented. So that's what the plays were about. I feel like I've gone on too long, so I'll stop there. I just wanted to express how what we've been doing, certainly here in Vancouver, what Pedro was talking about, has deep roots, and I'm always really happy to see new generations like Pedro, like Daniela, continue with that long tradition.
Thank you so much, Carmen. So next on my screen, we have Didanwi. Take it away.
Thank you, Catherine. Bueno, yo voy a hablar en español. Mi nombre es Didanwi Kent. Soy mexicana, vivo en la Ciudad de México. Soy investigadora en artes escénicas, historiadora del arte. Mis intereses sobre todo han estado siempre vinculados al tránsito entre artes. Me interesa de manera específica los estudios intermediales, los estudios performativos. He desarrollado mis investigaciones sobre todo en ese ámbito y de manera especial las manifestaciones relacionadas con el sonido. La escena creo que tiene siempre una dimensión sonora que es poco atendida o menos atendida de lo que quizá debiera. Y para mí ha sido muy, muy interesante trabajar sobre todo en esta capacidad de agencia performativa, también de lo sonoro en términos sociales, políticos y culturales. Y bueno, trabajo como profesora de tiempo completo en el Colegio de Literatura Dramática y Teatro de la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México. Uno de mis mayores placeres es la docencia, es el espacio del aula, pero me considero sobre todo también una espectadora, siempre digo que con picazón cognitiva, es decir, con mucha sed de comprender el fenómeno de la escena. Y me interesan entonces los espacios de mediación, en especial la relación espectador-escena. Soy coordinadora del Aula del Espectador de Teatro UNAM desde hace varios años. Coordino un grupo de investigación que es el Seminario Permanente de Estudios de la Escena y el Performance, en donde se congregan personas de diferentes disciplinas interesadas en investigaciones sobre la escena. Y he trabajado también como dramaturgista en algunos procesos, pero sobre todo me interesa siempre todo lo que tiene que ver con relaciones de investigación. Actualmente coordino, junto con Jorge Dubati, el Diplomado Internacional en Creación e Investigación, en donde estamos creando redes de investigación también en toda Latinoamérica. He tenido sobre todo mucho trabajo en relación con Chile, con Argentina. Mi mirada ha sido quizá más cercana hacia el sur. Por eso también el día de hoy hablo en español. Me siento con una responsabilidad de nombrar también desde el español, desde los matices y la fuerza performativa que tiene la palabra dicha desde la lengua materna. Y bueno, estoy muy contenta de estar el día de hoy dialogando con todas y con todos ustedes.
Muchas gracias, Didanwi. Sorry, I'll be going back and forth with the wonderful Web Switcher Pro, so I'm sorry if there's a delay there. But thank you very much. Up next on my screen, we have Emilio. Emilio, take it away.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I'm Emilio Mendez, he, him. I'll be talking in both English and Spanish, which I do hope it's not hectic, but dramaturgical. I'm a professor of theater studies at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, at UNAM. I've also worked as director and translator. I hope that sort of opens some questions further on. And for a decade now, I've tried to study and explore with students at UNAM the benefits of dramaturgical practice, not just in terms of how to foster and empower the students at UNAM to generate their own poetics, but also how to best discuss the way to elaborate their own artistic policies. I do believe dramaturgical work is essential for the consolidation of the work in the cell of a company. Entonces he tratado de explorar con alumnas y alumnos de la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México cómo para consolidar sus compañías hay prácticas del, llamémosle, dramaturgismo en español, que también pueden ayudar a involucrarse más con las comunidades en que están generando el teatro que generan. Esto en dos sentidos. Uno, entendiendo que teatro también es una dinámica, es un término fluido, quiero concebirlo así. El teatro no solo es el teatro profesional, el teatro es también el teatro que se hace en comunidades muy diversas, que puede tener intenciones no necesariamente comerciales. Y eso implica revisar nociones muy presentes en las prácticas dramaturgísticas, como el concepto que sí me parece complicado de traducir al español, que es outreach. I do believe dramaturgical outreach is the key element to, how to best put it, to best accommodate what dramaturgy means all over the world into Mexican theatrical cultures. Because in Mexico, many theater groups are limited to whether they receive or not subsidy. So I do believe one of the most powerful ways to make the most out of those subsidies is through outreach work. Through outreach, I do believe we make the most out of the subsidy, but even if there's not subsidy in any theater company or theater group, I think that el dramaturgismo nos ayuda a hacer preguntas fundamentales que me emociona mucho poder estar compartiendo con todas y todos ustedes hoy, reconociendo la genealogía de lo que nos tiene hoy aquí, reunidas y reunidos. Me emocionó mucho escuchar a Mark Bly, que dio su testimonio de sus primeras aventuras por acá, en compañía de la maestra Silvia Peláez y de la maestra Sabina Berman, pero también me siento muy persuadido a intentar traducir el trabajo de Michael Mark Chemers y de su pregunta crucial, Why this play now? Which I have attempted to translate into Spanish. ¿Para qué y por qué? No solo por qué. ¿Para qué y por qué esta obra aquí y ahora? Para esta comunidad. Y es en ese espíritu que pues me siento muy emocionado de poder estar compartiendo con ustedes esta mesa que me emociona mucho. Gracias, Catherine. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you very much, Emilio. Whoop. So up next on the screen, we have Daniela. Daniela, take it away.
Thanks, Catherine. Hi, everyone. Hola a todos. Mi nombre es Daniela Atiencia. I think I will also go the bilingual route because it's very much part of my identity. Nací y crecí en Colombia, Viví en Colombia hasta que tenía 19 años. Mi mamá es canadiense, mi papá es ecuatoriano. Entonces crecí en un hogar bilingüe. Y a los 19 años me fui al Canadá a estudiar teatro. Y desde ese entonces, pues el teatro ha sido parte de mi vida. Em, I am a freelance director and dramaturg, and I am also a deviser, which means I create theater from scratch. Um, if I'm going to talk about myself specifically, I'd like to hone it in on the lens of dramaturgy, because it's a topic I'm very, very passionate about. Um, and I mostly like to think that dramaturgy exists everywhere. And so I'm very much interested in dramaturgy in non-conventional spaces. But if we're thinking about the theater, lately I've been applying my dramaturgical skills in language, and this has taken a variety of forms. Mostly it's been supporting artists in their different processes of where they're at with language. So, for example, as Pedro mentioned, we had a great collaboration. He already had a dramaturg in English, but hired me as a Spanish language dramaturg to focus in on the language specifically of Spanish. And we were able to collaborate together on what that meant and what that looked like. But I've also collaborated with Paula, my fellow panelist who's here today, on work that she's done on translation and looking at her own translation and figuring out how it's fitting into a bilingual play as well. So I like to think my work is intersectional because that's how I was raised. And I'm very interested in language and translation, but also in cultural exchanges like this one. And I'm fascinated about how dramaturgical practice is being explored in other countries. And I'm also passionate about encouraging my fellow artists to see themselves as dramaturgs. I think Pedro and I have discussed this, especially within the Latinx community. I feel like many people are dramaturgs, but they don't see themselves as one. And I think that they are. And I'm interested about opening up that conversation and feeling like they have ownership over the quality and the way that they're observing and making deep analysis about work. And I'm very intrigued about how dramaturgy is practiced in Mexico, specifically for this panel. Anyway, I could keep going, and I'm sure we can have lovely chats about this, but that's a little bit about me. Y gracias.
Thank you so much, Daniela. Last but not least, we have Paula.
Hola, soy Paula Zelaya Cervantes. También me voy por el camino bilingüe. I'm a Mexican playwright, director, and translator. I live in Mexico City. I went to school in Canada for university. I was there for 5 years and then came back here. So I got the chance to meet a lot of wonderful Canadian artists while I was training to be a theater person, and then came back to Mexico to meet theater makers in Mexico that I hadn't met before. Before my university experience, I'd never really met theater people at all. So I first met Canadian theater artists and then came to Mexico to collaborate here. One project that I've recently been working on is a play that I co-wrote with a friend of mine, Ana González Bello, which was born in Spanish. It's interesting that we mentioned La Lengua Materna just now, because this play was born in Spanish. We wrote it in Spanish and then almost immediately had to translate it into English because we had the chance to take it to New York to a festival. So we took it there and we had one show, and then we kind of submitted it for a couple of prizes. It won the Latino National Playwright Award in Arizona, the Arizona Theater Company, and then a Tom Hendry's from Playwrights Guild of Canada. But all of these kind of awards and readers of the play were all English speakers and had come into contact with the play in English. And recently, about a month ago, we opened the show in Espanol. y lo tradujimos al español en el año pasado, pero no había tenido oportunidad de que se encontrara con su público, el público que era la intención que entrara en contacto con la obra. Y me llamó la atención lo emocional que fue eso y lo diferente que se sintió presentarlo finalmente en el idioma en el que había nacido y aparte para el público. Es una obra muy mexicana, habla de un superhéroe, de su hija y de el heroísmo en tanto lo entendemos, creo, en México, con la política que tenemos, con nuestra historia. Y entonces fue increíblemente aterrador, mucho más aterrador, porque nos sentíamos un poco más responsables del mensaje, creo, y eso no me lo esperaba, aquí que allá. Entonces creo que en esta como intercambio o esta plática sobre idiomas y sobre cruzar fronteras, para mí fue cruzar una frontera no solo de lenguaje, sino emocional a la hora de escuchar la obra en español por primera vez para el público al que iba. So that was really, it was surprising. That's why I'm talking about it today, because I'm still surprised by the feeling and the weirdness of it, and the fact that I never expected it to affect me that way. And so that's basically what I've been working on lately. I worked with dramaturgists for a long time in Vancouver and then kind of stopped when I came to Mexico. And only recently have I contacted one to start work with him on a new play. And I'm really excited because it's a part of me that I kind of left behind and I shouldn't have. And so this is really exciting, being invited to speak here just at the point where I'm about to start working with a dramaturg, a young Mexican dramaturg who's amazing. And maybe I'll get a chance to talk about him later. But thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Wow, I'm just amazed at this panel. This is such a fantastic group of people. So many places where we can just kind of dive in, and where do we start? You know what? I'm going to start with a very general question, which might be boring and vague, but maybe it'll open the door to more specific things. I'm not sure. So a few of you have spoken about specific projects that like involved cultural exchange, like Paula, what you were just speaking about, and Carmen, what you were mentioning as well. I want to hear more about these projects. So the question that I have is like, what is a project that you've been particularly proud of, or that was particularly challenging that involved cultural exchange? And I kind of wanted to take that to Pedro and Daniela specifically, because I personally am very curious about Made in Canada and how the kind of English and Spanish language dramaturgs worked together or not, or how that was approached. If you're open to it, maybe we could start there.
Sure. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
That's a great question for that project specifically, because that play was developed with many partners. I was at the Banff Playwrights Lab as a playwright, and the PTC Playwrights Theater Center was a company collaboration. And so with that company collaboration, their dramaturg, Kathleen Flaherty, worked with me on that piece for a number of years. And so when I approached Daniela about working on that piece, because I needed the care for, not by my choice of having been born in Canada, I needed a greater care and respect for that language that needed to be in there. And so then I approached Daniela, and that was her question, is like, how is it going to work, Daniela?
Yeah, there was, as Pedro said, already a dramaturg associated with the project. And if there's anything that I love about theater and doing my work is and dramaturgy is like how when I get to be specific about something. So actually this was ideal because as dramaturgs sometimes we have to focus on like the larger scale and the bigger picture. But in this instance, I was actually able to just hone in on the language, the Spanish, how it was serving the play, what it was doing, and Kathleen also felt supported because then she could relax and let me focus on the aspects of the play that was in Spanish. But I would say it was mostly a collaboration with Pedro. You know, we would just sit for hours and discuss about one word. You know, he's coming at it from, you know, his Guatemalan Spanish, and I've got my Colombian Spanish, and so it was also una conversación cultural entre nuestros países, nuestros idiomas, nuestras expresiones y tratar de decidir también si usamos un español más neutral o si tratamos de pensar en los personajes, porque la mayoría eran de América Central. Entonces, sí, se desarrollaron unas conversaciones muy interesantes acerca del dramaturgismo dentro de una obra bilingüe y, y qué decisiones se tenían que tomar para que igual el público pudiera captar la esencia del idioma.
Sorry, I was just listening to the end of that there. That's fascinating. I just wanted to follow up quickly since Danielle, you were just speaking. There's an incoming question for you, if you like. In the chat here, it says, Daniela, can you speak to the non-conventional spaces where you see dramaturgy? I was going to hone in on that too. That's fascinating to me.
Oh, can of worms. I mean, I don't want to take over. I just think that my brain is, I think, wired dramaturgically. I'm highly analytical. I'm always analyzing and observing. And so because theater is my world, I think that I apply naturally my dramaturgical lens to every aspect of a show. And that starts with how are audience members entering the lobby? What kind of experience are they having at that point? The dramaturgy behind the marketing, but also you know, having dramaturgical conversations with lighting designers and sound designers and everyone behind the scenes. So not just applying dramaturgy to the play and the script, but applying a dramaturgical lens to all the other aspects of theater. Y pues el otro lado es que me encanta tener estas conversaciones con personas que no están en el mundo del teatro, pueden ser ingenieros o arquitectos, que también pienso que uno le puede aplicar este lens de dramaturgismo a otros espacios que no son del teatro y así también poder hablar de lo que hago, porque no es fácil explicarlo a veces. Entonces, también me gusta poder hablar con otras personas que no están en el mundo del teatro y poder aplicar esta forma de analizar las cosas y la vida en ámbitos fuera de mi mundo.
Danielle, that reminds me of when we were working in a box office together. And we talked about the dramaturgy of patron services,
Yes,
which is
exactly
a whole other can of worms, like you said.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
We could have a whole panel on that if you wanted. Yes, that's exactly what I mean.
Next time. Now, Didanwi, there's a question coming, like the questions are starting to roll into the Q&A, so I'm just going to dive on those. And I do see one for you, and I did a quick Google translation, and I'm pretty sure it's asking about if you could speak to your dramaturgical work with the dimension of sound in theater. Is that correct? Yeah, take it away, Didanwi.
Yes. Thank you, Catherine. Bueno, quizá antes de contestar la pregunta, contestando un poco también a la pregunta que hacías tú respecto a cuál ha sido algún proyecto que haya supuesto un desafío en transfronterizo. Quisiera mencionar como desafío especial para mí Fui gestora, coordinadora y curadora del último encuentro del Instituto Hemisférico del Performance y Política, que se llevó a cabo en la Ciudad de México en el 2019. Y probablemente eran alrededor de 700 académicos, artistas y activistas de 23 países distintos. Fue un desafío mayor en muchos sentidos, ¿no? En muchos sentidos porque la mayor parte del encuentro se llevó a cabo en la ciudad universitaria, en la UNAM, y entender esta traducción institucional de lo que se hace, lo que se puede o no hacer en un espacio, las connotaciones que tiene cada uno de los espacios, cómo gestionar, trabajando con todo el equipo del Hemispheric Institute y también con colaboradoras y colaboradores de tantos países, fue para mí de una enorme riqueza. Y lo traigo a colación por esto que mencionaba hace un momentito Daniela. Creo que hay como actos dramaturgísticos, como el de la gestión, en donde la investigación se pone al servicio de esta comprensión de un todo, que no tiene que ver con la producción, sino con una sensibilidad de interpretar y de comprender los distintos universos culturales para ponerlos en diálogo. Para mí, ser curadora del EMI y organizar, que llevó además 2 años de gestión, implicó eso, dejarme atravesar por otros esquemas, permitirme pensar desde otros lugares, investigar muchísimo, y un poco un encuentro es una puesta en escena también, ¿no? Y bueno, sobre el dramaturgismo en relación al sonido, es curioso porque yo comencé la relación con la escena, sobre todo como investigadora. Mi tesis de doctorado es una tesis sobre la promesa y la promesa rota en distintos fenómenos del Don Giovanni de Mozart, vinculados al Don Giovanni, a la ópera. Y luego tuve la oportunidad de trabajar como dramaturgista en una puesta, en un montaje, bueno, desde la creación primera de la ópera Titus, con un equipo de colaboradores chilenos, con Guillermo Eisner, compositor chileno, y Carla Romero como directora. Bueno, creo que la primera vez que pude poner en práctica, más allá de una investigación académica, esto fue justamente en Titus. Y bueno, yo considero que hay mucho de la escena que se dice a partir por ejemplo, haciendo la adaptación del texto, que hubo mucha investigación que hacer ahí, que le hicimos colaborativamente. La adaptación del texto de Shakespeare hacia la ópera, bueno, de entrada tiene que salir mucho de la palabra que va a ser dicho con la música. Pero concretamente el tema, por ejemplo, de Lavinia, que normalmente después de que le cortan la lengua y queda muda, en cualquier representación casi de esta tragedia tan sangrienta de Shakespeare, eso es lo que aparece. Como nos interesaba y le interesaba al equipo hablar justo de este Titus, no desde la perspectiva de Titus, sino desde la perspectiva de Lavinia, fue muy importante todo en el proceso de investigación lograr encontrar la posibilidad de que esta Lavinia no quedara muda, sino que no pudiera pronunciar palabra, pero continuara haciendo lamento. Esto desde el contexto, además, de violencia, de feminicidios que vivimos en México. Entonces, bueno, ese es un ejemplo, ¿no? De para mí lo que articula una imagen intermedial desde la investigación para llevar a la escena desde un qué se quiere decir, con un equipo además de colaboradores, bueno, maravillosos, ¿no? Yo daba material, hablábamos mucho sobre la voz, textos, etcétera, pero quiero decir, fueron soluciones a las que fuimos llegando en un proceso de investigación compartido y que tiene mucho que ver directamente con el tema del sonido.
Wow, thank you so much for that, and thank you for kind of tying it back to my other question as well. Like that sounds like that's a fascinating process, and to work with those images and and how it relates to like your research and how it relates to sound. Like wow, that's fantastic. I'm sorry, my dog is next to me. She cries out, yes, Carmen, yes.
Oh, good. Now you can hear me, yes?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, just jumping on the whole question of dramaturgy. I mean, one thing that I know that we're discussing in Canada, and I'm curious as to whether this discussion is also going on in Mexico, is also the question of cultural and political dramaturgy, right? So, for example, right now I'm sure I'm allowed to say all this, Bob. No, maybe I'm not. No, I think I am. Okay. Anyway. Stratford is about to premiere a play. I don't think it's the world premiere, so scratch that. Is about to produce a play called Serving Elizabeth by this fantastic Afro-Canadian playwright, Marcia Johnson. And the play takes place mostly in Kenya. And so one of the dramaturgs that's going to be in the room for this production is the fabulous Mkonzi Muzioki, who is my fellow artistic associate of New Play Development, A, because he's a brilliant dramaturg, and B, because he's Kenyan. So he is able to bring the cultural dramaturgy into the room, right? And for me, I always also look at my particular projects through a political dramaturgical lens. So for example, my last play that was up is called Anywhere But Here, and Pedro and Daniela worked on it very hard. Thank you so much for working on that play. It was a world premiere by Electric Company. And the political dramaturgy of the play was We Are Here. So it was about exiles and refugees, mostly taking place at the US-Mexico border. So almost all the characters in it were Latinx, and almost all of them, well, all of them were exiles and refugees. I needed to be sure dramaturgically that the theme of it was We are here because you are there. And that is an actual line in the play, right? We, us Latinx refugees and exiles, are here in North America because you, North America, are there, right? So I needed to make sure, along with my dramaturg, Heidi Taylor, who's incredible, and she's the artistic director of Playwrights Theater Center, that political dramaturgy was threaded throughout the entire play, that we never dropped that lens, that anti-imperialist lens, right? That I wanted to make sure that the play was not an immigrant story, right? The immigrant story of North America that you see on stages being, thank you, thank you, thank you for letting us in. Yes, my global South country is a piece of shit. I'm so lucky to be here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so grateful. My global South country is backward and stupid and static and, kind of like an Orientalism, right? So it was very important for me that political dramaturgy, as well as the cultural dramaturgy, right, was very present during the process of writing and during the rehearsal, along with the director, making sure every beat of the play, nope, right here, we're dropping that lens, that anti-imperialist lens. How do we put it back in? How do we make sure that nobody in the audience, and it still happened, right? That nobody in the audience sits there going, oh, these characters are so lucky to be in North America, as opposed to the audience members going, oh, these characters are here because we are there. Shit, okay, let me think about that. I've gone on too long, but I just wanted to bring that into the conversation and wondering if that's if those kinds of conversations, si ese tipo de conversaciones que acabo de explicar están tomando, se están haciendo, están teniendo ese tipo de conversaciones, ustedes, colegas que están en México y en el sur.
Yeah, I'd like to offer any of our Mexican panelists to respond. Are there similar approaches to dramaturgy and to your work? Yeah.
If may I jump in just very quickly?
Yeah.
Because what excites me about hearing Carmen's perspective is what excites me, and sort of I also regret to acknowledge this, but in many sectors in Mexico, in my opinion, we have to fight the politics of theater making in order to include cultural and political dramaturgy. Básicamente a lo que me refiero es a que en México pervive de una manera muy fuerte la jerarquización de la práctica teatral, en la que la voz de el director, casi siempre varón, casi siempre el hombre director, es la Trinidad, es la voz de Dios Padre, Dios Hijo, Dios Espíritu Santo, es el pozo infinito de sabiduría. Somos un país profundamente católico, y esta lógica de que quien dirige una obra tiene el saber y el poder absoluto en muchos ámbitos de la producción es algo que ha costado décadas pelear, décadas ajustar, décadas bring into question even. O sea, incluso cuestionar esa práctica ha tomado mucho tiempo. Sin embargo, creo que a través justamente de un programa como el de la UNAM, en que tengo el privilegio de ser colega de Didangui, ha empezado a haber una transición en que cada vez más permea lo que escucho con emoción de Daniela, de Pedro y de Carmen. This is a collaboration. And indeed, even the stage director is another collaborator. It's not the holy trinity of theater. It shouldn't still be regarded as that. So for me, that's the first step. Hay muchas compañías que ya ven su trabajo desde una transversalidad, desde una horizontalidad auténticamente colaborativa, y entonces sí se suma el componente del dramaturgismo político-cultural. Solo quisiera poner un ejemplo, porque me llamó mucho la atención en The Keynote, que la maestra Sabina Berman ponía el ejemplo de the mythification of the Indian in Mexico. I do believe that. The Indian is mythified both by stagecraft and, regrettably still, by statecraft. Entiendo la razón para empoderarse mediante la designación mestizo, pero también me apena mucho reconocer que es en este año, el año pasado, en el 2020, fue la primera vez que en este país se incluyó una pregunta en el censo nacional que permitía a las personas afrodescendientes autoidentificarse como afrodescendientes. Y en México también, there's a mythification of the term mestizo, because mestizaje has been, since the 19th century at least, a very comfortable policy that has tended to marginalize and even invisibilize Afro-descendants in Mexico. Uno de los ejemplos, es muy común que una persona afrodescendiente en México sea vista como extranjera. Didangui y yo tenemos una colega en la universidad, la profesora Muriel Ricard, que en colaboración con, estoy olvidando el nombre del director, discúlpenme, quizás I'm fighting towards the hierarchy, but they have indeed collaborated very, very closely, both as a performer and as, well, this has been a continuum. They devised this story called Angelique, and I'm sorry for the spoiler, but Angelique is a Black performer, allegedly touring. She's an allegedly French Black performer touring Mexico, facing discrimination all over the place. And through a very interesting and compelling musical dramaturgy, both the performer and the director asked, well, do we want to tell the tale from the revictimization of Afro-descendants in Mexico? Or do we want to bring this into question while still having fun? And they devised a one-woman show, a piece of cabaret theater, a piece of musical theater in the whole extent of the word, of the term. Through boleros, la sandunga, la llorona, chansons by Edith Piaf, they started to tell this story about a Black foreigner in Mexico. And I hope they forgive me, because this is the point, how they address the political dramaturgy of it. In the end, the audience learns that she's not foreign. She's from the Mexican state of Oaxaca, and she has to pass as a French woman in order to, yes, be exoticized, so to speak, but to have a voice. Because for centuries now in Mexico, it's kind of okay if you have a darker skin color, but you must be foreign. So Carmen's question really sort of excites me, because this is the questions we should be making here. First, sort of revise the political hierarchy of theater making in many places, in many companies, in many industries in Mexico, the theater industry as a whole, but also how we should be asking this sort of questions. So I hope I sort of follow up on that.
That makes me think of exactly why we decided to have this conversation, because it seems like there are very similar questions and, like you said, restructuring of hierarchies happening here in Canada, or that like needs to happen here in Canada, and maybe is some resistance, you know. Oh, this is fascinating. Thank you very much for that. Now, I saw that you had a hand up at one point, Danwin. Did you want to respond to that as well? If not, that's okay. There's another question in the chat that we can go to.
No, it's okay.
Okay, good. I thought I saw a hand up. All good. So this question is from Marta, and I think it kind of ties back to what we were just saying, and I'd like to kind of flip it to both sides, because it's a question for the Canadian panelists. The question is, what is the perception of Mexican theater in Canada? And for Carmen specifically, like, how has it changed over time? But I'd almost want to flip that to say, like, what's the perception of Canadian theater in Mexico as well, if there is any? So I'd like to throw it up to whoever would like to respond to that.
Okay, I guess I'll just jump in. I think that there is, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, colleagues, but I think there is no perception of Mexican theater in Canada. I think it's completely non-existent. You know, I hate to say it, but I think there's zero perception of what Mexican theater is in Canada. I think that there's misconceptions as well, like about certainly the global South and Latin America in particular, right? Just because that's what we're talking about right now, that there is no theater there. It's like, what? There's theater there? What does it look like? What is it? You mean like there's actual like huge theaters? You mean like there's a huge theater scene, just like anywhere else in the world, right? There's mainstream theater, there's underground theater, there's devised theater, there's theater of the oppressed, there's et cetera, et cetera. There's like a shock that even exists. You know, when I talk about Corrientes, which is like the Broadway of Buenos Aires, right? And I've described Corrientes to Canadian colleagues that it's like the Broadway of Buenos Aires, where you see Broadway type shows. A lot of them are shocked that even exists, right? I hate to say it, but that's the reality. And the struggle for us Latinx artists here in Canada, as I know you know, Marta, has been for us to actually get work in the Canadian theater, because I would bet, not money, because I can't get it to you right now, but I would bet whatever that in Mexico, when people think of Canadian theater, they don't think of people like me and Daniela and Pedro. You guys probably think about white people, right? When you in Mexico think about Canadian theater, you're probably thinking about white plays and white people. You are probably not thinking Daniela Atienza, Pedro Chamale, etc., etc., etc. You're not thinking that, right? And so there's a problem there, right? There's a big border there, and I think the border is political and historical. Latin America, as we know, is not a race; it's an ethnicity. However, it is a racialized continent, right? When we view it from the north, right? It is a racialized continent because of a long history of imperialism that continues to this day, right? So because of everything that I'm just saying, the struggle for us Latinx artists here in Canada, I'm sorry to say, has not been to go, hey, everybody in Canada, let's look at Mexico and see what theater they're doing. No, our struggle has been much more day to day, like, shit, how do I get a part? How do I get work? How do I get my lens, my Latinx lens on stage? How do I get Latinx stories on stage about Latinx people who are in Canada, right? How do we reach our Latinx audiences in Canada, right? Knowing that much of the Latinx population in Canada is poor. Much of it is undocumented. How do we get to them? So we're not so concerned about how do we get Mexican plays, translated into English and then put them up here, right? That has not been our concern. It's been more about how do we Latinx people in Canada, confront erasure and systemic racism in the Canadian theater, So that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah. Carmen,
Yeah.
if I could add also, I think to think of Canadian Latinx artists, this country is so large, and our percentage of demographic, let alone the percentage of Latinx artists in theater, is so small that it's the connection that we're craving, because we have historically related from each other, just you are in the country, like with we're finding members. There's the one lone Mexican artist in Saskatoon, right? And so if there's alone, you don't have that power. And so creating these organizations, we're trying to raise awareness simply to the fact that we are here. Stop ignoring us. And hopefully one day we can achieve a momentum. Then that momentum can create the bridges to the South. And to have that stronger exchange, hopefully. For me, I don't know. I don't want to speak for everyone, but.
Yes, Didanwi?
Sí. Yo creo que en México pasa un poco lo mismo que comenta Carmen, ¿no? No es que haya una idea del teatro canadiense en general. Creo que, y pasaría sobre todo eso, una imaginación genérica, ¿no? De imaginar como una escena, sobre todo, quizá incluso cercana a la misma dimensión en la que se tendría la escena estadounidense. Sin embargo, creo que hablando de una forma un poco más local, sí me gustaría comentar que el Festival Internacional de Teatro Universitario, que tiene desarrollándose ya desde hace varios años en el marco de la UNAM, ha tenido ya varias veces intercambios con Canadá, y a mí me ha tocado ver ahí teatro canadiense, tanto por intercambio, digamos, con escuelas mexicanas, pero también me tocó hace un par de años, o 3, estaba buscando el dato ahora, pero no lo recuerdo, que se abriera justamente este festival con una obra canadiense, Les Sang, Las Sangres, que fue interesante porque además estaba justo en aquel momento Hans Thies Lehmann impartiendo un curso. Entonces, bueno, yo tuve la oportunidad de ver junto con Lehmann aquella obra que se autodenominaba como postdramática y que generó una grandísima incomodidad dentro de la audiencia del teatro aquel día. Fue para mí muy interesante el fenómeno, porque era un grupo de estudiantes de preparatoria canadiense con una especie de reformulación de varias cartas del Marqués de Sade. Era una obra muy interesante, pero que efectivamente estaba poco relacionada, o sea, poco enterada del contexto de la audiencia con la que iba a dialogar aquella noche. Estábamos teniendo justo en esas semanas, además, habían aparecido una serie de crímenes de feminicidios tremendos. Entonces, la audiencia lo percibió como una agresión enorme, ¿no? Porque era como, ¿cómo pueden venir a hablar aquí, digamos, como desde un lugar de un erotismo exacerbado, que era lo que sucedía ahí, como exacerbando la violencia? No es que fuera realmente así, pero fue un encuentro interesante, digamos, en términos culturales. Fue rico que al día siguiente, en el curso que teníamos con Lehmann, fueron estos chicos a hablar sobre la obra. Entonces fue riquísimo escucharles, porque claro, sus motivaciones, todo el universo que ellos tenían, de hecho tenía todo un pronunciamiento político en ese sentido también, y ético respecto al cuerpo. Sin embargo, esa traducción no se alcanzó a ver y a sentir en el público mexicano, ¿no? Pero fue muy rico poderlo dialogar ahí. Fue muy rico también poder deconstruir que pues realmente no tenía nada de posdramático, ¿no? Etcétera. Creo que a mí me sirve eso para hablar respecto a qué sucede en el momento en el que, más allá de ideas generales, yo sí creo mucho siempre hablar desde el conocimiento situado, ¿no? Desde la territorialidad, pero también sobre todo desde las micropolíticas que se dan en la escena. Es decir, no podemos seguir hablando de esta cuestión tan universal, sino de un montaje específico, un público específico, un momento específico. Y para mí, pienso en Intercambio Canadá-México y recuerdo aquella noche y todo lo importante que fue también para este grupo de jóvenes canadienses escuchar lo que su obra podía detonar también, cómo podía ser leída desde otro lugar. Ellos además con una gran apertura para escuchar, entonces fue rico, fue un intercambio creo que muy productivo, y creo que eso ocurre cuando nos reunimos a sentir y a pensar el teatro.
Wow, that would be, well, like you said, that would be quite an experience for a group of like high school students to see their work kind of like reflected back to them. Like, wow, thank you for sharing that. That was very interesting. There's another question just that popped into the chat here. And it's, are there any works that any of the panelists have worked on that notably bridge the gap or beginning the work of bridging the gap of bringing Mexicana or other Latinx work to Canada? And I almost wanted to direct that to Paula, because I wonder if that relates to the project that you were speaking about before, that you've started working with a Mexican dramaturg, and when you're kind of going back and forth between Vancouver and Mexico. If you're willing to speak to that.
Yeah, sure. The play I was talking about before is a different play. The play that we staged first in Canada, it was kind of like this back and forth crazy thing, is The Orb Weaver, and there was actually a question about that, so I can probably talk about that as well. This play I wrote while at my last year of university in the University of British Columbia. I wrote it, and then with a couple of friends from university, we just like staged a really experimental, weird version of it that completely changed afterwards. And then it was really interesting. One of the people involved in the project was my really good friend, Matthew Willis, who was acting as dramaturg. At the time, it was funny because I was dramaturging his play and he was doing mine. And so we would spend like entire days, like 8-hour long days, just talking back and forth about theater and our plays. And then I came back to Mexico to live. So this was like my last few months in Canada. And I was developing the play further. And I had the help of Kathleen Flaherty from Playwrights Theater Center. It was only like 1 or 2 like email, like an exchange. And what happened was that she asked 4 or 5 really difficult questions. And I spent like 6 months crying over them and freaking out. And they were so helpful to it just made me realize just how much I needed that help. It's really interesting what Emilio was saying before about kind of challenging this idea of like this director figure person that I had absorbed my whole life. Like you think of a director and it's this guy and he knows everything. And so trying to fill those shoes has been incredibly scary and just not helpful. And my journey through theater has been deconstructing that idea that as a director and playwright, I have to be the one person who knows everything, because it's really hard and it's just not true. So with this play, what I found was first in Matthew and then Kathleen was kind of like company that would be with me developing the play and being responsible somehow for the play, and I was not the sole creator of the thing. Then we here in Mexico, I was working with my producer, Jimena Saltiel, who's an amazing theater producer. And she acted as a kind of she wasn't aware of it at the time, but she was acting as a dramaturg as well, asking questions about the play, and then kind of asking me to apply for the Vancouver Fringe. We applied for it, and then the play, which was born in English and was then performed by Mexican artists, Mexican actors, was flown back to Vancouver with a team, a design team that was all Mexican, with Jimena, who's also Mexican, and I think the only Canadians involved were Matthew and the UBC Players Club, who were producers for the show as well, this university club helping us produce. And it was really interesting to see how that experience further developed the play. We couldn't, taking it across the border, we couldn't really, it's a play about people killing people, so we couldn't really take a lot of the props through immigration and the airport, because that would have been really hard. We ended up making a lot of the set pieces from junk that we found on backlanes. Anna, the actor who got there earlier, Matthew took her on this like tour through the Vancouver backlanes trying to grab suitcases and stuff. And what was interesting there was that we found the place aesthetic basically through not being able to do it the way we wanted it to. And that happening, we realized that the play was meant to be made through junk and through the things that we stole and borrowed from. So that was really interesting, and just how the play ended up developing. And then la trajimos de regreso a México, y en ese caso tuvo un anfiteatro, y en 2018 se presentó en el Teatro Helénico, y fue maravilloso ver cómo algo que había sido de pedazos de caja de cartón y demás, tener el dinero para poderse producir como queríamos, pero informado por las dificultades previas. Y ese proceso, creo, como que mi idea inicial de lo que es un director, una dramaturga, se destruye mucho en estos como procesos que me he encontrado con que lo haces en partes. Nunca va a ser perfecto a la primera. Esta idea de que tienes la respuesta correcta de inmediato tampoco existe. Y entonces estos procesos en pedazos difíciles, en los que hay muchas personas colaborando, en los que traes ida y vuelta, o sea, contar la historia del hilador, de York Weaver, es una historia larga porque justo tiene esa como todas estas líneas que se cruzan dentro de ella. Y de entender la obra que escribí cuando tenía 23 a ahorita que tengo 30, y entender lo que sentía del idioma inglés cuando lo escribí, ahorita que la verdad es que escribo en español, ya no escribo en inglés casi, y entender ese viaje a la hora de traducirla, darnos cuenta que su público final también era el mexicano, más que el canadiense, aunque en su momento lo escribí para los canadienses, no me puedo quitar de encima lo que soy, ¿no? Entonces, descubrir que su público finalmente siempre fue el mexicano fue muy interesante. Y sí, ha sido un proceso que sigo entendiendo, el de no tener, por eso la idea de Emilio me llamó mucho la atención, esta figura del ente que sabe todo. Y más bien, creo que estos procesos de dramaturgismo, de que sea difícil, increíblemente difícil, y que muchas personas estén metiendo su cuchara y que no nazca de un solo evento, sino que aparte se informe de las diferentes, sus diferentes viajes. En la obra hay un momento de un viaje, los personajes viajan de un mundo de cuento de hadas a la realidad de la Ciudad de México, y cuando se presentó en Vancouver a la realidad de Vancouver. Y creo que se informó mucho ese viaje a través de los viajes que hicimos físicamente subiéndonos al avión. Creo que no hubiera escrito un viaje si no hubiéramos necesitado ese viaje de Vancouver a México. Entonces, simplemente me parece interesante ese, como el entendimiento de cómo las obras, pasando por fases de ese tipo, crecen de una forma impresionante y además destruyen la idea de que yo como creadora tengo que poderla sacar completa como es, cuando no es verdad. Y hay tanta gente involucrada y además creo que es bastante terapéutico para como creadora saber eso, ¿no? Esa es como mi experiencia como de entender también terapéuticamente como creador que no es necesario esta como única voz, sino voces. Entonces ese fue el proceso de The Orb Weaver. And it's one of the things that I'm proudest of because we were okay with it not being okay until it finally was.
Thank you. That to me is such a great example of how like literally crossing borders, the theme of this conference, influences your work as an artist, like your like identity as an artist and like your artistic process. Like that to me is fascinating. And now I'm realizing we only have about 2 minutes left. I'm trying to figure out if there's a way to like summarize our discussion. I feel like we've really just scratched the surface. I'm hearing a lot of like similarities between like what's happening up north, like up here, and what's happening in Mexico. Like the common things I'm hearing is like how people define dramaturgy and define themselves as dramaturgs, and almost need a little convincing in that regard, or need to be convinced that they work dramaturgically or are a dramaturg. In my work as president of LMDA Canada, I'm always trying to convince people to join, and they say, oh, but I'm not a dramaturg. I'm like, well, you don't know it, but you are. And we all kind of work dramaturgically to an extent, right? And we can benefit from this like network of people, which is essentially why we wanted to bring this panel together. So in our last minute or two here, I wanted to thank you all, and I wanted to offer if anyone had any like parting words or anything they would like to leave everyone with, or gosh, if we need to do like a part 2 of this conversation, maybe next year or something, or if anyone has anything to share or any last questions or anything, please take the floor.
Pues yo solo quiero decir, oh, perdón, Emilio, me demoro 30
Daniela,
segundos. Simplemente que es un gustazo para nosotros en la comunidad latina poder compartir esto con ustedes en México. Es un honor realmente. Espero que estos intercambios puedan suceder con más frecuencia, porque realmente, por lo menos yo y creo que Carmen y Pedro también sentimos como el hambre de poder conectar con una comunidad latina y saber esas conexiones que ustedes tienen con el mundo, con el teatro, con dramaturgy. Me siento muy inspirada, entonces nada, simplemente agradecerles por compartir este espacio con nosotros.
Emilio, did you have one last thing?
Very quickly, just as a follow-up of what Dan said and Carmen, for a certain generation of theater makers in Mexico in the late 90s and early 21st century, actually Quebecois theater was the sort of inescapable thing. Michel Marouchard, Larry Tremblay, Carole Fréchette, Geneviève Villet, and John Mighton were the playwrights that were being translated and staged here in Mexico. And as Paula just said, for a generation of theater makers here, that was part of who they became or who they want to become. And I think at this moment, it would be thrilling to have Carmen's, Daniela's, Pedro's work being translated perhaps by Paula and staged here. Because as Carmen, you really moved me to think, yes, we were doing plays by Quebecois playwrights, and although I might be mistaken, all of them white. So the thing has to be, it has to be kept moving, and I do believe that this very panel is a very promising path to keep the conversation going. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. If something came out of this, like translations or exchange, like that to me is a big check, a big success. Thank you so much, everyone. Oh, Brenda's popped in. I'll leave it to you, Brenda.
Hello, thank you, Catherine. Didn't mean to interrupt, but what a fantastic panel we just witnessed. Fue un panel increíble. Sí creo que deberíamos tener una segunda parte. This will inevitably happen. Y muchas gracias, Carmen, Pedro, Dani, Paula, Didanwi, Emilio, Catherine, por supuesto. I just want to let the attendees know that now we're having a break for lunch, and if you want to join your regions for that lunch, we're very pleased to have you. Tenemos lunches regionales. México está en una de las regiones, así que los mexicanos o los que hablen español que quieran unirse a este lunch, bienvenidos. Muchas gracias por estar en este panel. I will see you all soon. Thank you very much.